how different do you think Monstrum is going to be compared to Gucht, and what are the positive aspects for you in the TTIP negotiations of getting Monstrum on? Second question, can you confirm the allegations that Monstrum has been working with the US mission very closely on the data protection package? I think you weren't ambassador at the time, but you must know a bit more, so thank you.
Well, as I said in my opening remarks, we're looking forward to her being the trade commissioner. I've worked with her, we've worked with her closely on data privacy, but I want to reiterate, she's been a very effective, tireless advocate for Europe, and she's been a very fair advocate as well for Europe. It's too early to say how she's going to work on these trade negotiations. She will be assuming her mandate on November 1, presumably, so I can't look into a crystal ball in that regard, but as I said, I think she'll be a very good interlocutor for us. On the allegations, really, I have nothing to add. She made her statements before the plenary session in her sessions, which I think are self-explanatory. As I said, we look forward to continuing our relationship with her. We've always found her to be, as I said, on data privacy, a fair advocate and always defending Europe's interests. And together we managed to resolve a number of very difficult issues that we had in front of us. But I have nothing further to add about those particular emails.
How important from the US perspective is ISDS? I mean, is it a deal breaker? In other words, if you didn't have it, would it be something
Well, I partially answer that question. It's important. It's an important part of a 21st century ambitious agreement. We're going to fight for it. I'm going to fight for it. I feel strongly about it, partly because of my past as a lawyer. I worked for 8 years as a lawyer, including in international commercial arbitration. I have some understanding for how this mechanism works. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, misconception about ISDS. And we need to be more aggressive in clarifying what it is and what it isn't, more importantly. Soon I will have an opportunity to speak in front of BEUC, the consumer organization. They have a conference organized on TTIP, particularly with regard to ISDS, and I'll have an opportunity to give a long speech that goes through their paper in response to the EU consultation document. There are some criticisms in it which are interesting criticisms, and there's some others that we fundamentally disagree with, and I will be giving a detailed explanation and a refutation of some of their positions. So the short answer is it's important. We're going to fight for it. It's too early to speculate about it not being part of the agreement.
What do you think of the version in the CETA agreement? What they've done to handle the criticism that has arisen on ISDS? So, I mean, okay, you can't say right now if you can copy and paste that into TTIP, but are there any concerns from that chapter and looking at what they've done there?
I don't want to get into that. It's a different agreement. We're focused on TTIP. I'm not going to comment on what's on the CETA text. I've seen it. Inevitably, there will be some instances where our text will be different, but I'm not going to comment on the issues that CETA has in that regard.
I know you commented a little bit on the stage, but obviously there were quite a number of people in today's audience who were saying, well, look, these are two advanced countries with two, advanced rules of law. Why not just leave it to the courts? I mean, I know you said a little bit, but maybe you could kind of expand on why you have to have ISDS rather than the current system of
Well, I'll try to give an answer to that. The first one is, how can you not have ISDS in this agreement and then for a future agreement with other parts of the world say, we want it? How are you going to convince China to have ISDS when, for example, you don't have ISDS in a US-EU agreement? It just isn't going to work. And secondly, the response I gave is that many investors, and I get many investors in my office every week, who tell me that in order to invest in some parts of Europe, they feel that ISDS is important to give them comfort. And I was suggesting in my remarks that Europeans should listen. These are the companies who have an ability to invest large sums of money, and by investing to stimulate jobs and growth, they should listen to those concerns. They feel that the degree of legal protection they get among the 28 legal systems is varied, is uneven. Again, to be clear, this is not my judgment, it's their judgment. I think Europeans should listen to it.
I think think the Commission also made a point that actually they could arbitrage some of these differences, and it's to their benefit to arbitrage on the differences in the laws. And do you really believe that the U.S., the Europe would collapse without U.S. investment? There are other trading blocs to fill the vacuum.
What better place to start in relaunching jobs and growth than a trade deal between the two largest trading blocs that share common values and common sense? Oh, well, I'm sorry, but if you look at any blocs of the world, there are no closer blocs than the US and the EU in terms of their standards. If you were to suggest to me that the Pacific regions and the United States are closer in their standards and their values than the US and the EU, I would fundamentally disagree. US and the EU are the closest regions in the world in terms of the strictness of their standards and the values that we share. That's the place where we should start. So I think that
There were some, areas pointed out, for instance, digital labor laws, the food we eat, the food we put into our mouths, the digital privacy, and those are areas which are very distinct differences.
yes, well,
A direct impact on well-being, the well-being index, which is something the OECD is very concerned about.
there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. Look, I have a binder in my office, right, with examples of where our standards are stricter than standards in Europe, both also on food and on consumer products. There are many instances where the EU standards are stricter, but as I mentioned, with thousands and thousands of standards, it's very hard to generalize. But there's a misconception which we have to defeat, that in every case the standards here are stricter. It is simply not the case.
Mr. Ambassador, last week at the European Science Forum Gucht with 600 policymakers in the health sectors from all over Europe and beyond, there were a lot of anxieties about the TTIP in the health sectors, and not just from people from the UK with the NHS. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I don't know what particular concerns they have. It's very difficult for me to respond. We don't see what concerns could arise from this trade agreement. Are there any particular concerns that they raised?
People were saying that, well, if because the American companies are so efficient in running hospitals and all this, they're going to run our health sector for us, and what kind of independence are we going to have? And these were the sort of things that I heard over there.
Well, that's not sufficiently specific. It's very hard to respond to that kind of a general allegation. Again, TTIP is not going to change the choice of states about how they run their health systems. And Commissioner de Gucht made that very clear. So I don't see any impact of these negotiations on that sector.
Thank you.